Hey everyone, welcome back to Python Pioneers. We'll be picking up where we left off by learning your first steps of coding in Python, with some help from Automate the Boring Stuff. Go ahead and read Chapter 1 of Automate the Boring Stuff with Python, and then watch this video to see some live action coding. And of course, my AI guy is here to help and add his insights. Say hello, my AI guy.
Hello coders, excited to explore Python basics with you.
Python is full of possibilities, but we'll start with the basics. We'll use the interactive shell, a fantastic tool to test out Python code. But before we get started, let's take care of something really important. If you're a fan of dark mode, go ahead and click on the theme button here, and that'll switch you over to dark mode. You can click that button at any time to switch between themes. I'll be in dark mode for the rest of our videos, so feel free to switch that if you'd like. Okay, so we were talking about the interactive terminal. There's two ways to open an interactive terminal in Mu. You can click the Run button. This will run your program and you'll get these three arrows down here. You can type in code and have it evaluate. But we're not going to use the Run button, so I'm going to click Stop. And actually, I'm going to zoom in. So I'm on Windows. I'm going to hold down Control and use my scroll wheel to scroll in and make the text bigger so it's easier for you to read. And we're going to click on REPL. REPL, this button right here. For what we're doing now, if for some reason you click this button and it doesn't work, you can use the Run button and that'll be just fine. There are some nice features that the REPL will give us when we get further on, but we're not going to cover those in this video quite yet. Okay, so we have our interactive shell open. And let's write out some code. So if we type 2, or that's a 1, 2 plus 2, and I press enter, Python will actually evaluate this math for us. So it added 2 and it outputs 4. This is an expression. We have values. So 2 and 2 are they're just values, and then an operator that takes an action on those values. Anywhere in Python that you would provide a value, you can put an expression in instead. So that'll make more sense when we get that far, but just know that you can replace any value with an expression. That's because when the Python code runs, it will evaluate the expression to a single value and then use that value. So another example, we'll click down here. 5 plus 9. Now notice I didn't add spaces. In Python, the spaces are not mandatory. It's more of just what's common practice and what makes your code easy to read. So the standard is to have one space between each operator and value. You could have many spaces and it works just fine. You can have no spaces and it works just fine. When you get further along in your code, the only time that spacing is very important is in the front of your code, and we'll get to that a little bit later on as well. So don't worry about that. So we've seen plus. Python has many other operators as well. Standard 8, or let's do 5 minus 3. So just like the plus, you have minus, which is what you would expect. Now for division and multiplication, we have different operators. So if I want to divide 6 by 3, I use the /. The forward slash is just to the left of your shift key. The backslash is above your enter key. So don't use the backslash. Make sure you're using a forward slash. And if we run that, we get 2.0. Now, the 0.0 is an interesting thing to pay attention to. 2.0 is a floating point number. Floating point numbers have a point that floats through the number in some place. So the decimal could appear anywhere in the number, but the important part is it has a decimal. Now, what if we didn't want a floating point number? What if we wanted to know how many times does 3 fit into the dividend? So, for example, 5 divided by 3. 3 fits in 1 time. And if I run that, I get 1.66666666667. I don't want that. I just want 1. Well, you can do integer division or floor division, and that basically is going to only tell you how many times it fits in as a whole number. That's pretty easy to do. All you do is type 2 forward slashes. And we only get 1 now. So that's integer division, or floor division is another word for it. Another operator that we have is multiplication. That is indicated by the asterisk. So you might be familiar with the X for multiplication. We don't use that in coding. X is a letter. It doesn't denote any kind of operator. So the asterisk, usually right on the 8 key on your keyboard, will do multiplication. So if we press enter, we'll get 25. And we're doing small numbers now, but the really cool thing about this, Python is extremely good at doing math, just like a calculator would be. So we could type in an arbitrary large number and have it tell us the answer. And it's able to do that just like a calculator would be able to. Now, another operator that we have is the exponent operator. How do we raise a number to an exponent? So the way you do that is with 2 asterisks. So if I want to raise 5 to the power of 2, I say 5 space asterisk asterisk space 2. Pretty cool, right? Okay, so first of all, just to reiterate, we're covering a lot of math operators here. Don't let that scare you. Programming is not about being really good at math. There are some specialties where you have to be exceptionally good at math, but for the large part, you can do all kinds of fun coding projects and even have a career as a programmer and not be good at math. The important thing here is always logical thinking. You want to be able to break down a problem and come up with creative solutions. That's what being a coder is all about. So don't let these examples scare you and make you think, oh man, it turns out this is actually about as complicated as the math is ever going to get. So we're done. We've covered all math you need to know for Python. Not too bad, right? Okay, so we covered a lot of math operators, and we talked about floating point numbers. I don't think I actually said it, but it's worth mentioning these whole numbers we call integers in programming. So whole numbers are integers. If they have a decimal in them, they are floating point numbers. There's another data type that we have in Python called a string. A string is just characters. It's a string of text is what we call it. So that's 3 data types now we've talked about. We have integers, floating point, and now string. So string is literally just characters. And you wrap it in single quotes like this. And if I press enter, it just outputs the string again. You can use operators on strings. So if I say JSON plus, let's say is doing his best, and press enter. Notice how it outputs a whole string. So we had 2 separate strings of text, and the plus sign added them together. And it looks good. Now I added this extra space here, that way when they get added, it actually looks like a regular sentence. So that's strings, integers, and floating point numbers. Okay, so something important to note. Not all operators work on all data types. If I try to multiply a string by another string, I get an error because there's no way to multiply a string by another string. And these errors, when you first see them, can be very intimidating. You look at this line and it's like, I don't know, trace back, most recent call, last. It's very confusing when you first look at it. But actually, if you break it down, it's not too bad. We have an arrow pointing to a number, and that number is the line where our code is having problems. In this case, we're in the interactive shell, so that line will always be 1. But when you write a program later, it will tell you the line number, which is denoted here on the left-hand side where you write your code. It'll tell you the line number where the error happened. And it even highlights the code that's causing the error. So we know that this code is the problem. Now, down below we get details about the error. And it says that it can't multiply the sequence by non-int of type string. Now, if you read that and you think to yourself, I still don't know what you're talking about, that's okay. What you can do is, you know where the error is. Go look at that code and you try to work out yourself what could be the problem. Maybe try commenting out that code or deleting that code and writing it again. You can also try searching online for help. And we're going to cover a lot of how you can do that. How do you search online for help? How do you comment out your code? We're going to cover all those things. Okay, so we know we can't use all operators on all data types. We can use all the operators we learned about on integers and floating point numbers. That won't be a problem at all. But strings are a little special. So for example, if I say JSON times 2, that does work because I'm not multiplying the string by another string. Now I'm multiplying the string by a number. And that's just essentially telling Python, make that string twice. And so the output is literally just JSON. So that does work. So stick to multiplication and addition. And really, there's very few times where you need multiplication. It's very specific. And that does it. We've covered the basics of Python operations, how you can use operators to work with values. I encourage you to pause the video here at the end and practice this yourself in the interactive shell. Take some time to become familiar with each of the different operators and each of the different data types, the integer, the floating point data type, and strings. Make sure you're familiar with these concepts before moving on to the next video. I'll see you there. Thank you.